Welcome, everybody. My name is Mark Ralski. I'm the CEO of IPFD, and I wanted to take an opportunity before the panel starts, the webinar starts, to thank everyone for coming on behalf of the IPFD board. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today and spending their time to develop their presentations for everyone's benefit. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us from all over the globe. And we're very excited that we have several people joining us that have never been to one of our webinars before. So our very big welcome to you. And I'd like to thank the community of the IPFD team for all of their efforts in making this webinar possible. It takes a lot of work and a lot of planning to make this work for everyone who's here to listen. And I would like to thank our members and our contributing members for their commitment to IPFD and to the work that we do and for dog health and wellness. And I wanted to hand the mic over to Aimee. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you all so much for attending this meeting. I'm just going to run through just a couple of minutes of information about how the meeting works. You should have the ability to provide questions through the Q&A system, which our panelists and experts can type a response or speak a response. You are also welcome to raise your hand if you have information that can contribute to the conversation, or if you have a question that you would like to propose more broadly. And there are also chat options for you to provide questions as audience members, either directed to specific panelists or open to the panelists completely. And if you have any other technical challenges, you can let us know, and we have technicians on standby to provide assistance wherever is required. We may or may not run some little impromptu surveys, provide them to you. However, we're expecting the majority of today's meeting to be more conversational. We've just had a question about whether this is going to be recorded to watch later if someone needs to leave, and we are planning on recording this, and we've yet to determine completely how we're going to share this information, but we certainly want to make this information available to those who were unable to attend today or who are going to need to leave early. So I hope that's answered the question for that audience member and more broadly. So once again, thank you very much for joining us today. And I believe I am also going to be introducing parentage profiling as well. If there were any other questions or any other panelists having any questions or comments, I'll just give you one moment now to ask that while I pull up my presentation. So part of the reason why this particular meeting was chosen and why we have focused on encouraging participation from kennel clubs and breed clubs is that the International Partnership for Dogs for some time has been having conversations with many of our stakeholders around parentage profiling, particularly as it has evolved over time, and different panels have been used as standards, or changes have happened between different kinds of technologies. And we realized that there were many people that were at different stages of integrating parentage profiling into registration systems or into breeding plans, and that there were many different parentage profile providers who had different experiences and philosophies about panel testing that we thought would be useful to be sharing and having some sort of harmonization or cohesion, particularly as we move into a more global, increasingly global breeding community. So I wanted to talk a little bit about just an overview of parentage profiling very, very briefly so that we're all somewhat on the same page, and talk a little bit about why it's particularly important to support robust registration and health schemes. Parentage testing, Pedigrees are usually provided by the registration body. Often they are based on self-reported parentage from the breeder, occasionally with visual confirmation. There are different countries have different policies on this, and sometimes confirmed with parentage testing. Pedigrees are assumed to confirm the breed and the heritage, etc., and have an added value to a purebred or pedigree dog. In addition, pedigree information, the heritage information, is data that is often used to populate different health programs and tools, particularly when it comes to being associated with genetic testing results, coefficients of inbreeding calculation, hereditarily clear status, estimated breeding values, etc. Parentage testing, on contrast, compares the genetic profile between the potential parents and the progeny to determine parentage. So this doesn't actually require any kind of breed specificity or not. It is purely confirming or excluding, in some cases, who the progeny's parents are likely to be. So there's quite a bit of difference between their purposes and what they're designed to do. However, they are, as you can imagine, quite complementary. So continuing discussing parentage testing and pedigrees, the reason why some of this is so important to have parentage be accurate is that there have been estimates of up to 9% of inaccurate parentage recorded by kennel and breed clubs, and this can vary by breed. And whilst that may or may not seem like a significant amount to you, there has been research that indicates that at just a 5% mistake over 6 generations can cause a disease mutation frequency of 0.2, which is about 20%. This has serious consequences for health risk to dogs. It undermines the confidence in pedigree registration, and of course, it impacts breeding plans as well. So this is something that obviously is quite important to us to have accurate pedigrees. What causes pedigree inaccuracies can vary. This can be just based on breeder record errors. If they're unsure of what the parentage is particularly true for sires. This can be down to dual sire matings, particularly unintentional ones, leading to unknown split litters. Of course, there can just be dogs, particularly male dogs, that sort of get in there, and you end up having a litter that you weren't expecting. And of course, there's purposeful deception. If there are breeders who are motivated to use a sire or a dam that has reached the limits of their kennel club's policies for number of litters or number of matings, or there could be people combining separate litters into one and registering them as one litter, purposeful split litters, and unsanctioned crossbreeding, etc. There could be a number of reasons, both inadvertent, which honestly is likely the majority, and those that are purposeful deception. In any case, this can have that impact that we are concerned about and have those unintended consequences. So some of the challenges in having inaccurate pedigrees or having parentage that is unconfirmed is obviously reputational damage and trust to the kennel clubs and the registration bodies, leading to reduced value of pedigrees and even the breeds themselves. There have been breed and kennel clubs that have faced lawsuits, and of course, one of our primary concerns is inaccurate data for the health programs. If you have inaccurate data, that leads to inaccurate breeding tools and resources, and can lead to breeding decisions that are based on inaccurate information or information that is false. And it also means that individual dog records and assumptions of health or assumptions of low risk become challenging. Risk to breeders could also include, depending on what country you're in, lawsuits either from puppy purchasers or even some challenges when registering with your registration bodies, and of course the breeding and the health risks that we have mentioned before. When administered robustly, parentage profiling, on the other hand, is extremely accurate. The new ISAC panel 2020 is reporting more than 99% accuracy in determining parentage. And some panels, especially the larger single nucleotide polymorphism or SNP-based panels, can be used to have additional benefits such as solving parentage cases where only one parent is available. And there's been some usage for investigating or looking into genetic diversity and heterozygosity. So there's added benefits to some of these larger parentage panels. And I would imagine that Peter or other panelists today will be speaking about that in more detail. Benefits to the kennel clubs, and by kennel clubs I also mean breed clubs. I recognize that different countries have different registration policies, but the benefits to accurate parentage ultimately lead to accurate health data. Any health tools or advice or breed monitoring that occurs is based on the assumption that the dog is who it claims to be, with the associated heritage and the associated pedigrees going back over time. So if you're having any interest in monitoring genetic diversity, or if you have a policy of assigning hereditarily clear status for genetic disease risk testing to your dogs or to your breeds, it is incredibly important, of course, to have accurate parentage. There is increasingly the reputable damage and the lawsuits risk that many breed and kennel clubs are facing, including from government bodies who are looking to use registration bodies in a more agricultural kind of monitoring way than perhaps they have historically. Accurate parentage, of course, by implication, also reaffirms the breed or the breed type and improves the trust and value in a pedigree. And it's likely coming anyways is increasingly going to be a requirement or a strong recommendation, both from internal bodies and external, like agricultural or government bodies, to have some kind of affirmation of parentage. Benefits to breeders, again, kind of reiterating that accurate parentage equals accurate health monitoring the results and improves breed records. It's also an improved trust and reassurance in your own breeding plans, that there are no secrets being had either within your own plans or within your colleagues. And there is an added value to puppy buyers. Some of the challenges that all users of parentage and parentage testing who are looking to introduce this into current system is that there will be inaccuracy in records. Remember that 1 to 9% that I mentioned earlier. So some things that kennel or registration bodies should be considering is some sort of perhaps a grace or catch-up period to make those any pedigrees more accurate, maybe some amnesties for breeding policies that may have not been met, and how you're going to, if you're already using an older parentage panel, address issues around retrofitting or switching to new parentage panels. This is particularly perhaps the case between STR technology and SMP technology, but even between different ISAG panels. Perhaps Peter and others can talk about this, but there may or may not be communication or harmonization that can happen between that information. There are obviously going to be costs to the breeders and owners who are going to have to undertake testing, and of course, potentially fairly significant investment by registration bodies into their data systems and data management, whether you're starting from scratch or whether you're having to retrofit a current system. And there is some consideration in choosing a provider or which panel is going to be recorded in your systems. And I'm very confident that there's going to be a few conversations about that. Today we will be mostly focusing on the ISAC panel because we do have good representation and good speakers on that. The only other particularly adopted panel is run by the AKC, and unfortunately, I don't believe they are joining us today or that they have representation here today. There's also going to be some challenges on education to the public and to the dog breeders, and perhaps even within your own breed club and kennel club communities, and policy changes that may need to reflect what the parentage testing confirmed by DNA may mean for different breeds and different breeders' systems. But as I hinted at, parentage profiling for all or for most dogs, particularly breeding stock, is likely going to happen. So this is the time, perhaps it was the time even a few years ago, that we all need to get ready to make sure that the international kennel clubs are on the game or ahead of the game to do the best to meet the needs of the dogs and meet the needs of the breeders and continue the support of really robust and really valued pedigrees and pedigree dogs. I made a reference to a piece of research. I think Catherine Mellish, who was one of the authors or contributors on this, is here today and maybe can speak to this a little bit more to talk about the estimations of inaccuracies that I mentioned. And this has probably already been talked about a little bit, but we appreciate your support and attendance. And if you have any questions about what I've spoken about, you're very welcome to email me directly. And I encourage you all to have a look at dogwellnet.com after this meeting as well, if you haven't already. And now I'm going to attempt to stop sharing my screen. And I appreciate your patience. This was a little bit wild today. I don't know what, there must be something in the air, but there we are. So am I out of share screen? Oh, thank you very much. Sorry for that, everyone. So I would just like to invite our next speaker, Peter, who will be very kindly presenting on introducing us all to ISAG and give us a little bit more detail about the different kinds of profiling and profiling information that he has. And thank you so much for joining us, Peter. If you'd be so kind, I'm just a little bit flustered today, of 1 or 2 minutes introducing yourself. I would so appreciate that.
So today I'm in the role of the chair of the Applied Genetics of Companion Animals Committee at ISAC, and I'll try to explain more formal parts of comparison tests and pedigree verification. Leanne will give a talk more on the technical, practical, genetic side of the problem. I'm actually teaching genetics and animal biotechnology at University of Ljubljana, and I'm also collaborating with the National Kennel Club in Slovenia, but by heart I'm a handler of a rescue dog. So this is my everyday connection with dog breeding and dog lives. I use the title which was suggested, and I'll try to talk about guidelines which are set up by ISAC, what comparison tests are, and how exchange of DNA profiles is possible and how it is working. First, if I try to resume a little bit the history of our society, the first conference dealing with animal blood group typing, which was actually the first method used to prove pedigree data and to verify with lab techniques the correctness of pedigrees in cattle first, was held 1954 in Copenhagen. At that time, the strongest core actually working on these problems was in the North Europe and Scandinavian countries. Later, in 1966, there was a conference in Paris, and the society changed the name to the European Society of Animal Blood Group Research. And later on, in 1974, the society was expanded to the International Society at the conference in Davis in California in US. From 1990, the society is present under the name International Society of Animal Genetics. And this name was adopted at the conference in East Lansing in US. And since then, the society tries to get promotion and public relations under this acronym ISAC. During the history, actually, the focus of the research and focus of the topics which were reported at the conferences became broader and broader. If the society started with cattle blood groups in the 50s, now in the 2020, we have a society dealing complexly with all possible facets of animal genetics and trying to keep together very different technologies which might be used for clarification of genetic and, in the last period, genomic questions related to domestic animals. This graph represents nicely how were contributions on the conferences of the ISAC focused on different techniques. It started, as I said, with blood groups, but by the time the interest on blood groups reduced because there were other techniques, other markers, which promised much more informativity compared to blood groups. Blood groups were very informative in cattle, but in other species, not so much. At the same time, the use of biochemical polymorphism, so-called biochemical markers, was also present quite heavily at the beginning, and it increased towards the 70s and 80s and then decreased. The main reason why this technology was put aside was that the methodology was relatively expensive, and the enlargement of the number of loci which were studied by these methodologies was very expensive. For each locus, for each system, you practically needed a special laboratory technique. In the 70s and 80s, MHC genotyping became very popular and promising, but it also reached the plateau in the 80s, and it didn't develop as expected further on. But here we have a very nice startup with the molecular markers, so-called DNA markers, which started in the mid of the 80s and increased their presence in animal genotyping tremendously. And today, actually, we are only or heavily, predominantly relying only on DNA markers. The next topic, which is very important in this context, is the idea of comparison test. It means to organize the laboratory activities in different countries, to harmonize the methodology, and to ensure that the same animal sample would be genotyped in the same way with the same final result in all laboratories which are collaborating in this comparison test. So the first comparison test was actually organized in the early 50s at a conference in Copenhagen, and this was limited to cattle blood group testing and a revision of the results at this conference. And the early period of this comparison testing was devoted to reliable comparison of results between laboratories and exchange of regions, mainly anti-sera, for the reliable genotyping of blood groups. And this was actually, at the beginning, a very vivid field of collaboration between laboratories. However, with the time, it became actually a burden because producing and shipping biological materials on long distances became impractical. That time they very early established also the role of the duty laboratory. The duty laboratory has to provide animal samples and to provide also the genotypes for a smaller number of animals in this set to give the other laboratories a chance somehow to calibrate their system to the unique genotyping system. Participants of comparison tests reported their results on the conferences and discussed with the duty lab obtained results. However, the introduction of molecular markers later abolished the need to exchange regions among laboratories, and this was a very important simplification of the procedure. So what is the relevance of the parentage testing? It has been already addressed in the previous talk. And we see that application of molecular tools is absolutely necessary technical support for verification of pedigree data. Molecular parentage testing can reveal intentional and unintentional errors in the pedigrees and offer the chance for pedigree correction. So we have seen that in dog pedigrees, we can expect between 1 to 9% mistakes, which is actually compared to other animal species rather a low range. However, it is certainly important to have pedigree errors corrected if possible. In addition, the availability of molecular data allows estimation of basic population parameters, as already mentioned, like effective population size, inbreeding level, and estimation of genetic distances, which are important parameters for managing animal populations. The availability of molecular genetic data can be and is an important support for the future selection strategies. So a short visit card from ISAC. As I mentioned, this is International Society for Animal Genetics. We have a president, Claire Gill, secretary, Sophia Miko, and treasurer. These are three most important functions in the society. And we have also the executive committee, which is taking care for proper operation of the society. Within the society, we have a large number of committees which are focused on different animal species and on different aspects of studying genetic problems and genomics in different species. So for today, for us are important these two committees: applied genetics of companion animals and companion animal genetics and genomics. In the ISAC, we follow actually the strategy that we have for each important species or group of species, two types of committees. The one, ISAC Applied Genetics of Companion Animals Committee, is a standing committee related to applied genetics and comparison tests. So the committee's task is to supervise and to organize the comparison tests, to determine duty lab, and during the conference with an organized meeting where we discuss comparison test results. The committee also establishes guidelines and rules for the conduct of comparison tests. On the other side, we could even say more basic science-oriented committee is ISAC Companion Animal Genetics and Genomics Committee. And this committee is focused in particularly genetic and genomic questions related mainly with dogs and cats, but also with other animal companion species. So even horses or some birds sometimes appear in the program of these committee sessions. So presently used markers are mainly microsatellites or short tandem repeat markers and single nucleotide polymorphism markers. So microsatellites were the first type of molecular markers, DNA markers, which replaced genotyping of blood groups. So this was kind of a transition period where we had to retype a number of animals from the deeper part of the pedigree in order to establish the relationship between parent-offspring generations for at least a few generations in order to introduce the new type of markers which was represented by microsatellites. So for every animal species, there is a number of microsatellites loci, which are described in the literature. However, not all loci are equally appropriate and equally informative for pedigree testing and parentage testing. Therefore, an important task of the ISAC committees is to work on the sets of certain type of markers, in this case of microsatellites, and to propose the optimal combination of different microsatellite loci, which are informative enough, robust, and simple enough for reliable genotyping, and which give altogether sufficient exclusion probabilities for false parentage in case that we face such a case in practice. The new alternative is presented by single nucleotide polymorphism, so-called SNPs. Compared to microsatellites, microsatellites have normally a relatively large number of alleles on a certain locus. So we have between 5 and 12 alleles normally on the particular locus. And these alleles are distributed relatively equally in the population. And this gives actually a good information content to the certain microsatellite locus. Compared to SNP markers, in case of SNP markers, we only have normally 2 alleles, and this reduces the informative value of a single SNP locus. Therefore, we have to include a larger number of SNP loci in the parentage testing. Normally, this is somewhere between 100 and 200 markers which are used for parentage testing in different species. However, the benefit of SNP markers is that automatization and allele calling is a little bit easier to be automated in case of SNP markers compared to microsatellites, where sometimes a manual checking is still required, especially in some cases where the loci are a little bit more difficult for interpretation. In this context, it's very important to be aware that in all breeding populations, we deal with small populations in the context of population genetics. So it means that these close breeding populations experience permanently reduction of genetic variability through generations. The consequence is permanent increasing of inbreeding, and reduction of heterozygosity. So the higher homozygosity on the other side results in higher frequency of recessive genetic defects and in a reduction of fitness. And in addition, in some species, the breeding practices even support the reduction of genetic variability in the population. Just to mention one, the so-called popular sire syndrome. And this is a cartoon showing what happens actually in the small population. We have increased inbreeding, genetic drift also contributes to the reduction of genetic variability and increases mortality, and altogether results in an even smaller population in the genetic sense, even if the census in the population is not reduced. So what are advantages or disadvantages of different marker systems? The introduction of molecular markers in general increased the informativity of marker systems. We have large number of alleles per locus and almost unlimited number of loci which we can pick for the testing procedures. We can pretty much standardize technologies for a large number of loci, which was not possible in case of biochemical markers. We can adapt marker systems to the situation in different species, in different breeds. And automatization of laboratory procedures and interpretation of results is available, and we can take advantage of it. So what are ISAC guidelines related to comparison tests? The mission of the comparison test is to enable laboratories, the genotype animal DNA, to maintain high and comparable standards, to have international agreement on nomenclature which is used, and rules for kinship testing. ISAC established rules for conducting the comparison test at the international level, and this is quite an important benefit of this international collaboration, that we always take care of the appropriateness of our marker sets to the global situation on the, in the populations worldwide. Who can participate? Can laboratories which are institutional ISAC members, and they are registered with ISAC to participate in comparison tests. So institutional membership is a requirement to participate in the test. The administration of comparison tests for a species is supervised by a standing committee which prepares the rules of procedure for administering the comparison test and conducts the analysis for resolving disagreements regarding the test results. So the announcement of the comparison test is communicated by the secretary of ISAC to all institutional members. The list of genetic markers subject to comparison are identified on the ISAC website, including accepted methods for reporting and relevant technical information, and the nature, preparation, and handling of samples for the test should be identified by the duty laboratory, and we have for each species separate duty laboratory for each comparison test. Comparison tests are performed regularly biannually. Application forms, technical details, and time schedule are announced on the ISAC web page. The biological material is provided by the duty laboratory. Normally, these are DNA samples from 22 animals. 2 of these animals are so-called reference samples. And for the reference samples, the duty lab provides genotype. And this is the possibility for the laboratories to calibrate their interpretation of markers to have the harmonized genotyping results with the provided samples from the duty lab. How the laboratory performance is graded. The genotype rating system is established for the ISAC recommended sets of markers. Laboratories report test results to FAS, and FAS should provide all participants with the results for all laboratories no later than 3 weeks prior to the conference. Therefore, the deadline for submission of the comparison test results is normally end of March, and our conferences are normally beginning first half of July. At the conference, all the participants should have the opportunity to discuss the interpretation of the results. And if there is some disagreement, it can be discussed at the conference, and some arbitration is organized by the ISAC in order to set such a dispute regarding the difficult markers or difficult samples in a certain comparison test set. Exchange of DNA profiles among laboratories. This is a very important benefit of comparison tests, that all laboratories which are calibrated within the ISAC system can exchange results and can be sure that results obtained in another laboratory are reliable because they used verified and harmonized methodology, and they know how to interpret alleles on a certain locus. So ISAC is permanently working on harmonization of the nomenclature for genetic markers used in comparison tests for different species. And this nomenclature is accepted from all laboratories participating in the comparison test. So this is a very important benefit of comparison tests, that laboratories worldwide accept the same methodology and same interpretation of the results. So basis for comparison of results is that laboratory used standardized sets of markers and standardized methodology of genotyping and nomenclature, which allows a reliable comparison of genotypic results among laboratories and exchange of data. This allows identification of missing data or reconstruction of at least partial genotypes for missing animals in the pedigree, and helps in clarification of different results among the laboratories, which can be then discussed and these difficult cases eliminated. So what are the advantages of genetic testing? Fast verification of the pedigree data, estimation of basic population parameters, possibility to extend standard marker locus analysis for loci associated with diseases and phenotypic traits. So not only parentage testing, but also some health-related issues and important and interesting phenotypic traits. And this information base is a base for future breeding decision. So I hope there was a short presentation of the formal frame, which is provided by the ISAC for parentage testing and for organization of comparison tests. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Peter, for that presentation. I really appreciate that. It was very informative. It was especially helpful to be reminded of the importance and value of having that accreditation or that standardization and making it easier to be a more international exchange, and also giving us a little bit more information about how parentage panels necessarily needed to evolve over time to meet the needs of the dog breeding populations and to adjust with the advancement of technology. I believe there are a few people who have just joined us or joined us a little bit late. We did have a little bit of a challenge when organizing this meeting, that it was immediately after a time zone or spring forward change for North America. So I'm hopeful that if the panelists are open to this, we would be able to have a copy of their presentations that we could also share online, or a version that you're happy to have shared, so that people can go back and read the information if they weren't able to listen at this time.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And I realize we're running a little bit off of the time schedule, but it's okay because I built in some wiggle room. So I'm very pleased to welcome Leanne van der Goor, who has experience not only with parentage verification and technology, but some more kind of practical, perhaps, experience as well. And we look forward to hearing from her. So thank you so much, Leanne, for speaking today.
Yeah, thank you, Aimee, for the invitation to present today about parentage verification and technology. I want to talk to you today about how does parentage verification work, the logistics behind it, technologies, what's the difference between ISAC 2006 versus ISAC 2020, exchange of DNA profiles, which is important, how to choose the best suitable technology for you as Kennel Club, and some take-home messages. Yeah, to give a bit of background about the laboratory I'm working for, it's we perform DNA testing already for several decades, also a lot of parentage verification in different species and also in dogs. And we have laboratories in Netherlands, Belgium, Germany and Norway, and work with distributors in several European countries and New Zealand. How does a parentage verification work? Each dog has 22 pairs of chromosomes. One per chromosome pair, one is inherited from the father and the other one from the mother. Markers, here you see an example of 2 dogs with 2 chromosomes and 1 marker shown on the chromosomes. So each dog has per marker 2 variants. In this example, the top animal has orange and a purple variant, and the bottom animal a yellow and a green variant. If you would mate those 2 dogs, then the offspring can have different combinations. If for instance, the top animal is the female, then the mother can pass on the orange and the sire the yellow. So you have orange yellow, or you get the combination of orange together with green. But the mother can also pass on the purple variant. Then you can get the combination purple with yellow or purple with green. And to give you an example of a parentage that doesn't qualify, here you see a dog that has the variants orange and red. And this red variant you don't see in either one of the parents. So that means that this dog cannot be an offspring from this combination. It still can be an offspring from the dam, because the orange variant, the dam can pass through, but the sire doesn't qualify for this offspring. And in a parentage verification, we don't look at just one marker, but we look at many markers. And all those markers together, they give enough power of exclusion. And if all markers qualify, then we can finally say the parentage qualifies. When you start with parentage verification or DNA testing, it's important to have the logistics in place. So you have you need to have an online platform that you can do the requests, send out notifications that samples are being taken. Samples need to be sent to the laboratory. The laboratory performs the DNA testing and analyzes the data, and then the results need to be reported to the Kennel Club. Looking into the technologies Peter already mentioned, there are two different technologies, STRs and SNPs. It started with STR markers, and in 2006, Isaac established an official international STR panel for parentage verification in dog, and that panel is known as Isaac 2006. Over the years, the technologies developed further, and then the SNP technology became available, and in 2020, Isaac established an official SNP panel, and that's known as Isaac 2020. As Peter also already explained, it's everything is standardized, and that makes exchange of DNA profiles between laboratories that are members of Isaac possible. The differences, it's the marker type, and Peter also mentioned that the STR markers have many different variants. That means that you can make a lot of combinations of the variants, and the SNP markers only have per marker 2 possible variants. That means that you only can make 3 possible combinations per marker. For instance, if you have yellow and blue, you can have yellow yellow, blue blue, or blue yellow. So only 3 combinations per marker. And therefore, if you establish a parentage panel, you need much more SNP markers in the panel than STR markers. And to give you an idea, the Isaac panels for STRs contains of 21 markers and the SNP panel of 115 markers. But both panels are suitable for parentage verification. They have power of exclusion higher than 99%. The SNP technology has a few advantages. One is a higher level of automation in the laboratory. And another advantage is that you can, in the same test, add markers for health, for genetic diseases, traits, but also to get insight in the genetic diversity. Important to know is that profiles from Isaac 2006 and Isaac 2020 are not comparable. So if you have the parents tested on Isaac 2006 and you test the offspring on Isaac 2020, then the verification of the parentage is not possible. So that's very important to keep in mind. If you want to move, if you have already been doing STR parentage verification and you want to move to SNPs, then you need to make a transition. You can do that in different ways. One way is to start testing all offspring on both technologies. Then you can do the parentage verification on Isaac 2006. And the puppies you also test on 2020. So when the puppies get offspring, those offspring only need to be tested on 2020. You can also do it the other way around, that you test the parents that get new offspring again on Isaac 2020 and the puppies only on Isaac 2020. And a third option could be imputation. But I have a big question mark there. If you look at cattle breeding, they faced this transition about 10 years ago, and they invested a lot in setting up imputation. It involves a lot of data from many animals from both STRs and SNPs, and developing the algorithms to do the imputation. A few breed organizations implemented it, but there were many problem cases and still a lot of retyping needed to do. And another thing that makes it more complex is that you need to do it per breed. So you need to set up and develop the imputation per breed, and that makes it also quite complex. Exchange of DNA profiles of ISAC 2006 happens already for many years. There are only 21 markers, so the way it's done is that certificates are printed or PDFs are sent around from one laboratory to another, and those profiles are entered manually into the system, and that works well. If you have a mismatch in a case, you look up the profile, double check, and make sure that everything has been entered correctly. For the ISAC 2020 profiles, the big difference is the number of markers. There are 150 markers, and manual entering of those profiles is just not an option because the risk for mistakes is too high. And therefore, in order to set up a good exchange of SNP profiles, of ISAC 2020 profiles, there needs to come an exchange system. And yeah, the big question is how to set up such an exchange system. Again, looking at cattle breeding, they faced this problem years ago. And the ICAR, in a cooperation with Interbool, they have set up an international exchange platform for SNP profiles. It's a very nice system. Breeding organizations can apply for access, laboratories can apply, and they have different levels of authorizations. Some organizations can only view, others can also edit data or uploading and downloading DNA profiles. So the important question is how to set up such an exchange platform for dogs. I've been in contact with ICAR if they can also set this up for dogs. And the first reaction was that they focus on farm animals, not on companion animals. But if the community thinks that's a good way to move forward, we sure should get in touch with ICAR again to see if they can set it up for dogs, but maybe also IPFD can help or another international organization. Then the choice of technology. The most important question is, what do you need or want as a kennel club? If you only want to do parentage, you can choose both STRs or SNPs because both methods are suitable. If you already have a history with STR, then you can just keep using STRs and it's no need to make a transition because you're only doing parentage verification. If you are starting up with parentage, so you don't have a database yet with profiles, then I advise to start with SNPs because then you're probably better prepared for the future. And of course, what's also important is the laboratory that you're cooperating with. What are their capabilities? Can they offer both methods or only one? And what are the costs? That's also, of course, important. If you want to do more than parentage, also test for health markers and traits and get more insight in genetic diversity, then the SNP technology, SNP markers are the best choice. If you already have a history with STR markers, then you need to make a transition to SNPs. Looking a bit more into the SNP technology, what you do is you can test on an array, and then you can test 10,000 of SNP markers in one test. Here you see a picture of some chromosomes, and on each chromosome you can test many SNP markers, and they are evenly distributed over all. In a dog has 22 chromosomes, so they are spread all over, evenly distributed over those chromosomes. And then you can include the parentage SNP markers, but you also can include health or trait markers that are markers that scientific research has proven causality with a genetic disease or a trait. And you can also include markers specifically selected for genetic diversity. So our laboratory developed such an array, including the Isaac parentage SNP markers, more than 350 markers for health and trait, and 35,000 markers for genetic diversity. So with when you send in one sample, you do one DNA test, but you get a lot of data, and we developed different applications to analyze the data. Yeah, of course, the parentage verification, but also validated results for the health and trait markers. And it's good to keep in mind that not all markers are relevant for all breeds. So you can also choose that only the relevant health and trait markers are analyzed and reported. But for breed management, it's interesting to use all data. And for genetic diversity, the coefficient of inbreeding can be calculated in the percentage of heterozygosity. And also a tool that can help in selecting lookalikes has been developed on those markers. And also a tool, a mate select tool that can help you to select the best matings. For breed management, you can monitor the frequency over time for health markers. For instance, at starting point, you have a percentage of carriers in your breed or in your population of 20% and affected 5%. Then in a few years, you can follow over time what's happening. Is the percentage of carriers and affected animals decreasing? Then you know it's going well. If it's increasing, maybe, yeah, you can take action. But also data from irrelevant health markers can be very interesting to monitor, because what if a marker that has not been published in scientific literature to be present in your breed pops up in your breed? You can follow it and if necessary, take action to prevent health risks. Breeding can, of course, also be calculated based on the pedigree. But you can also do that based on the data from the SNP data from the array. If you do it based on a pedigree, then all the puppies within a litter will have the same value, but based on DNA, you can calculate it individually per dog. And of course, you can compare that then to the average of the breed. Also, the SNP data can help you if you're selecting lookalikes. Here, for instance, if the breed shown in the middle in green is the breed of interest, and you have several related breeds, each dot is a dog. This is a principal component analysis. And then if you have several lookalikes, the genetic information or the genetic background can also help you in selecting the best lookalikes for your breed to approve. And yeah, when you're trying to find the best mate for your dog without DNA testing, you choose based on phenotypic information, and you don't know anything about the genetic background. So with the mate select tool, you can also use genetic information. And you can do that in a way that you don't reveal individual data or results from dogs. In the background, you use the information from the health markers, and you can set the criteria for your own breed for specific diseases if you want to prevent carrier-carrier matings or carrier-affected matings. Then those animals will not be shown as good partners for mating. The other way around, you also can keep genetically interesting carriers in. Because if, for instance, the female dog is normal and there are several carrier dogs, male dogs, but you can keep mate dogs because the offspring will not be affected. And then you can also use the information from the genetic diversity markers. You can rank for the genetic diversity based on low mean kinship. And maybe number 6 and 7 are not as good as number 1 till 5, but they're still acceptable. And at some point you can set the criteria that you don't accept it anymore because the dogs are genetically too related, and those will not be shown anymore. So with this tool, it can help you selecting the best matings. Then finally, some take-home messages. Before you start, it's good to think about what you need and want. Do you want only parentage or more? Because that's important for the choice of technology. And an exchange platform for SNP profiles is what's really needed. But the question is how. And then, I don't know if there are any questions, then let me know.
If we have any urgent questions right now, otherwise there will be plenty of time in the discussion. So I can give you a moment or two while I'm chatting to think of any questions that can't wait. Otherwise, we can bring them up in the discussion. I just wanted to thank Leanne again, and also just raise a little comment that communicating with the 62 or so genetic test providers that are participating or engaging with the harmonization of genetic testing project, many of them are moving away from providing STR parentage panel options and focusing primarily on SNP technology and SNP-based products. So that's something to bear in mind, that not only is Leanne raised a very good comment about finding the parentage or profiling system that meets the needs of your club or your breed, but maybe some awareness that as technology is being more and more popular, the SMP-based or SNP-based, it may be worth bearing that in mind as well if you're thinking of starting a program, or if you're thinking of transitioning your program into updated technology. We have a panelist, Bill Lambert, who is very kindly going to give a quick presentation from a Kennel Club's perspective. And if he is ready to speak, that would be fantastic. And we are running a little bit over. I've been assured that we have 10 or 15 minutes or a little more that we can add on to the end of this. But as the more efficient we can be to make sure that people are able to continue to join us, the better. So thank you all for being speedy and helping us on this kind of wild technology day. And thank you, Bill Lambert. I will turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm going to assume that you can hear me, and now we do the difficult bit of sharing the screen, which I hope will work. And right, I'm getting a thumbs up, and I'm assuming that you can hear me. So no one's saying that you can't. So I'll just do a bit of introduction. I've gone past the first slide for some reason, so I'll just start. I'm Bill Lambert. I'm the Health, Welfare and Breeder Services Executive at the Kennel Club. First of all, I'm going to apologise that you're seeing me and not my colleague, Dr. Joanna Ilska, who can speak far more eloquently on this topic than I can. But as Mark said at the very beginning of the meeting today, we've just had Cruft's Dog Show this last week, and Joanna's taking some very well-earned time off at the moment. So she's done a very short presentation for me. And the good news is it is very short, but I really just wanted to share with you exactly where we are as a Kennel Club, and so that you can understand from a Kennel Club's perspective what we offer, some of the challenges that we have, and where we hope to go in the future. So first of all, I'll start from where we have been. We have been offering parentage profiling through partners for a long time. All we do, we don't actually hold the database. We've never held a database of profiles. All we've simply done is added it to the dog's record, the fact that the dog was profiled, to try and give a little bit more confidence and provenance to the registration of that dog. We add the information onto the registration document. The information was not displayed publicly. We publicly display a lot of information about dogs on our website, but we didn't do this information. We did actually, we stored some genotypes, but we didn't actually incorporate them on our database. We used external laboratories, a number of external laboratories, and we would actually record if a breeder or owner wanted their information recorded, we would record it, providing it came from a decent laboratory. But what we could do, we actually could call upon parentage verification if we had doubts. So if we had breeders who we felt were not being honest, we had reason to believe they had fraudulently registered dogs, and we wanted to actually confirm who those dogs were, we could call for parentage verification. Obviously, we do verification on the parents, both the sire and the dam, and the puppies, to actually confirm who the dogs or the litter was, who the breeder said it was. And we would go, in certain cases, we'd go one stage further. So there were one or two breeders who were abusing our system, who we put on what we call a DNA directive, which meant that we would not allow them to actually register puppies unless they actually provided had their DNA profiles provided for the parents of the litter. So that's really what we've done in the past. We were using the ISAG 2004 panel, but it was a really, what I would say, a light touch process. Alongside that, we have been offering for some time, we've been recording DNA health test results, and we've also been offering a DNA health testing product as well. So where we are now, we started to offer our own DNA profiling product in November 2022. We're coming at it from a slightly different direction than other organizations are, in that we recognize that we have a unique opportunity to reach people who are breeding for the first time. A large number of people who breed dogs register just one litter a year, or they may have only registered one litter in a lifetime. So we have an opportunity to reach out to those people. And of course, a lot of these breeders don't understand anything about health testing, for example. So we try to reach these breeders, and we've tried to offer packages, DNA health testing packages that are at an attractive price, so that we encourage people to health test their dogs. And that's our main motivation. We offer 39 single breed specific health packages and a few additional health tests that are single standalone tests. But when we do that, we include in that product a DNA profile, and we are using the ISAG 2020 panel. And we will obviously offer parentage verification as a service. Hello, what are we doing here? Oh, sorry, go back one. Obviously, to go into the future, sorry, stay where we are for a moment. So our packages at the moment offer a DNA profile and parentage verification. It's effectively a mix and match, a DNA profile on the puppy, pre-existing ISAG 2020 DNA profiling parents, and we also offer parentage verification where we have disputes between breeders and puppy buyers. Obviously, where we want to go with this, we want to increase the popularity of DNA profiling. Now, I should immediately say, Kennel Club registration has traditionally been based on trust. The Kennel Club has been in operation for 150 years. It's a 150-year anniversary this year, and for many years, that has worked very, very well. But as you heard earlier, we don't know that mistakes can happen. Genuine mistakes can happen. You can have dishonesty. You can have a variety of things happen that actually lead to false pedigrees, or rather mistaken pedigrees or errors in pedigrees. And so we are trying to increase the awareness and availability of DNA profiling. There are a number of challenges to that. We try to learn by other people's mistakes, and what we have to do, we have to try and keep breeders with us. We don't want to drive people away. And you've already heard there are some challenges with this, and certainly in terms of the cost. But it is really, we're on an education exercise to try and persuade people, and everything that the Kennel Club does tends to be by persuasion rather than by force. In the future, we will want to incorporate DNA profiles in a centralized database. We don't do that at the moment. And one day in the future, I think that mandatory profiling could come along for Kennel Club registration. But we're not there yet. We're a long, long way away from that yet. And I think what we'll do is try and reach a point where we reach that tipping point when we get a large number of people using profiling, and it becomes really the sort of gold standard, if you like, of registration. It's, as I said, there are challenges to it. We recognise that. We have a slightly different position in the UK than some other kennel clubs, in that we register quite a large proportion of the dogs in the UK, somewhere around about 30% of dogs in the UK. And it's one of our missions is to try and influence as many breeders as we can. So we want to try and keep that 30% with us rather than drive them away. And we recognise that any barrier you put in place could actually potentially drive them away. But as has been said earlier, we recognise that this is coming, whether we want it or not. There is a threat of genetic testing laboratories. They could offer a registration or a pedigree that has more provenance, if you like, more guarantee of parentage than what we can offer. But we recognise that, and it's very important that we offer something that is reasonably future-proof, and so we do actually move with the future. So I think that's really all I have to say. One more thing. What we will do, obviously in the far future, we will intend to work towards automated parentage verification. So when we have enough profiles, we will be able to literally pick dogs and know exactly where they exist in the pedigree database. The fantastic thing about all kennel clubs, or certainly our kennel club, is the amount of data that we do record. And so being in a position where we can actually be presented with a profile and actually know exactly who those parents are is where we want to go. So I did say it was very short. That's all I have to say. This is exactly where the Kennel Club is. I'm not saying we're in where we want to be. I'm not saying we're in the right place or the wrong place. It's just a matter of fact. That's where we are at the moment.
Thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate it. And you win the gold star for being efficient. And I think the Kennel Club's experience will be really, really valuable for the different stages that many of the kennel and breed clubs are at the moment. You did highlight some particular differences with the British government and the Kennel Club systems, that they are separate from each other, and that is not necessarily the same as it is in continental European and other kennel clubs. So persuasion if you don't have kind of legal enforcement behind you is definitely something that I think a lot of kennel clubs will have experience of, or maybe in a similar position of. So I really appreciate that comment. We are now opening up the discussion and questions, particularly to our panelists, but if there are any other experts who are attending as observers today that have contributions or experiences that they would like to make available to our audience, you're welcome to do so now. I'm going to give everyone a minute or two to raise their hand or put a question in the Q&A. And if I don't see that, I already have some questions that I can start prompting some of our panelists with. Okay. Any questions? Any hands? I don't know. I'm not seeing any hands from the audience, but I don't know if that's a me problem or if they aren't there. Okay, I have a starting question or a request for comment from Laura Roest. The Dutch Kennel Club has recently, fairly recently, adopted a genetic or a parentage profiling program. I wonder, Laura, if you'd be able to just talk a couple of minutes about what your experience, in contrast perhaps a little bit to what the Kennel Club's experience has been, particularly maybe your experience of some of the concerns that we've all raised, perhaps around costs or registration changes. That would be really, really helpful for us to hear about. And Bill, I see your hand is up.
Well, I don't know if Bill will go first, but we started already some time ago. So we started in June 2014 with ISAG 2006 markers, with STR markers. And recently we switched with a good system to the SNP markers. So in November 21, we switched. And at the moment we are doing a lot of double testing so we can make the switch. We test the puppies on both types of DNA, just both on the SNP as the STR markers, and therefore we can do the parentage verification. It does cost a bit more, but at the moment it's not so expensive. And if you look at quality, the price is not that important anymore. So if we see the pedigree cost did go up, but we didn't see a large decline in the pedigrees. We do have, of course, some issues with the samples are not at the right quality or such a thing, and that takes some more time. And we do have some challenges, but maybe we come over that later, where it's very difficult to determine the parentage. And I believe Aimee said in the beginning, you also need to give some amnesty. So sometimes it is very difficult to provide all the information you need. So if you think about artificial insemination with an animal that is already diseased, you have to find a solution to still meet all the criteria to do your parentage verification or give some amnesty. That's it in very short, but I think there will be questions later.
I have a quick question, Laura. If you don't, maybe you're comfortable sharing this. Could you give an idea about what the cost is to the consumer, just to give people who have no reference point what this might be? And I think in euros is fine if you happen to know.
In euros is the only thing I know. If we just ask the breeder, he will pay 45 euros for every puppy, and that includes the DNA, the STR markers, and the SNP markers, and the parentage verification. So it's an all-in price, and it is mandatory. So you can't choose to have it without. You always have to pay that part.
Thank you so much, Laura. And Bill, I think you had your hand up, but I also have the same question for you. I know that the combi breed has health risk tests included as well, but just to give some of our audience members a rough idea about what the costs are. And I know that'll probably be in pounds sterling, so maybe someone can magically Google what that is in euros as well, or we can just have an idea. That would be very kind.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, yeah, so I'll come to your second part in a second, okay, but I want to just make one point and then I'll come back to the costs. The point was made earlier on about breed verification, and I just wanted to make a point and just give our Kennel Club's view on breed verification. We do not see this as a breed verification service. Obviously, it's all dependent on the panel that you're referencing against. And so if you're, and my view is over a period of time, we will develop our own database of dogs, and therefore our profiles will represent a very accurate picture of our database. Of course, we have an issue, and of course, I appreciate as time grows, this will become more and more accurate. But at the moment, we don't see this as a threat. We don't see profiling as a threat to Kennel Club databases, because and I try and use these words a bit carefully. What breed it is really a man-made concept. It's not necessarily what makes up a breed. What makes a good example of a breed is really decided by things other than genetics. It's not just the genotype; it's the phenotype. So, but over a period of time, I recognise that over a period of time, if we have 25,000 Labradors, and they're all, we have profiles for all of them in our database, it will represent a true picture. At the moment, that's not the case. And I am led to believe by some that if you look at genetic profiles of one breed in the UK, they can actually be closer to a different breed in the US, for example, because the breeds have split. Now I'm talking and I'm trying to fill space because I've asked one of my colleagues what the cost is of our packages, and I can't remember off the top of my head. It's not something I deal with, but I can tell you the information's on our website. I think, bearing in mind, I did say that we effectively offer the profiling, we include the profiling in the package, but I think our health testing packages, I think, I want to say around about £100, and that will be for a number of tests. So I'm sorry, I can't be more accurate than that. I should have the information.
No, that's fine. And I put you on the spot. And I think for euros, that would be around 120 euros. But that seems very comparable to panel testing for parentage and genetic tests kind of worldwide. So that makes perfect sense and seems within the typical experiences we have. We have a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask people who have technical knowledge, so maybe Leanne and Peter might be the best people to respond to this. We've had a couple of questions around informatic tools or software performing parentage testing for automatic verification, or somehow Leanne mentioned whether there was an IT solution perhaps to making STR and SNP parentage profiles sort of speak to each other or be more compatible. That would be, if that's something that maybe Leanne or Peter could talk about, that would be appreciated. Oh, and I've just had a comment to one of the Kennel Club colleagues that says that the testing services, DNA testing services, range from £55 for a single test to £140 for bundled tests. So again, well within the kind of industry standard for parentage profiling that includes trait and disease tests. But going back to the technical question, Leanne or Peter, are one of you available to speak to any bioinformatic tools that could be used, or whether perhaps that's even financially worthwhile compared to just retesting?
Yeah, about tools for parentage verification in our laboratory, we'll build our own software. I think there are some software tools available that you can buy, but yeah, as we have our own system, I don't really know which good systems they're out there. And about the imputation, if you want to set something up, what you need is data from a lot of dogs that have been genotyped on both STRs and SNPs. And you need to set it up per breed. So it's something, yeah, it's quite a large project, which needs bioinformaticians that can develop those tools. And the experience in the cattle breeding is not that good. So yeah, there are quite some doubts if it will work well in practice.
So I'm going to interpret that Leanne's response is maybe if there was a lot of financial and technological contributions that make that possible, but it sounds quite challenging. We've just had a comment from Huber Bauer from Labaclin that there is an STR and SNP imputation from other labs that are being used, but might not suit the dog world. So perhaps that chimes along with Leanne's experience in the livestock world. I've also had a question about the relevance of certification of collection for a sample collection from Parentage from someone in Australia, or commenting on the Dogs Australia DNA databases. Key to, I'm going to go ahead and answer this, but someone else can chime in. Key, of course, to having robust parentage panel testing is that the dogs at the point of collection are done in a robust way. Most countries utilize some sort of requirement of a veterinary or veterinary professional or independent sample collector in order to be assured that the dog that is being sampled chimes along with any kind of other permanent identification that is being utilized, or other kinds of confirmation to make sure that the actual dog and the associated pedigree information and the genetic sample are all the same, or based on the same things. So certainly the relevance of certification of collection is key to any kind of a robust system. Having said that, if there are mistakes or problems, they do tend to reveal themselves genetically or in other ways. So I hope that answers that question. And I see Laura has just raised her hand maybe to speak to this as well. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, I completely agree with you, Aimee, that's of course important to start with a correct identification of the dog and collect the DNA sample. But if you look at the parentage verification, it will come out in the end. So if you're not correctly taking the sample, then you have to take that into account, the whole parentage. And if you use a stat dog again, you have to use the different animal than you said it was again, and that's something that's very difficult to keep on doing. So I don't think that there's a lot of problems with the parentage verification, and I think it's important to do a good identification at the start. But I think with health testing, it is very lucrative to hustle things up. So then the identification is even more important, and you should have that very well registered and taken care of. In the Netherlands, we are a very strange country and very small, and our kennel club has their own people that go to every litter. They see every litter, they identify the dogs with the microchip number and take the DNA samples. So I'm completely aware that we're unique in that point, but that helps with a completely good system for the parentage verification and for health test screening as well for the future.
Thank you, Laura. Similar questions actually to both Laura and to Bill, or other kennel clubs who have maybe some experience in this. There's a question about how you handle it if there are partners from foreign countries and you're performing parentage verification. How do you get the profiles from these dogs, and how do you provide these to your laboratories in paper form or CVS files, or etc.?
It's a very good question, and it's something that we're really struggling with the ISAC 2006. As Leanne mentioned earlier, you can just manually take them from a paper. With the ISAC 2020, it is too much data to just manually enter in the system, and we need an international system to combine the results from different laboratories. So we're really looking for a solution there, but at this moment, we don't have it. But maybe Bill can comment or add to that.
No, I think, Laura, you've answered it very, very fairly. We haven't had that challenge yet because we simply can't offer it, and it's because of where we are in terms of. I know I was Aimee knows very well that I was actually quite keen to offer parentage profiling and start to store data quite some years ago. But actually, I'm quite pleased that now, in retrospect, that we held off, because obviously 2020 not being backwardly compatible would actually have meant that lots of people who actually profile their dogs, that information would be no use to them now. So I think we're rather pleased that we only came to this fairly late. And of course, what I am hoping is that we don't suddenly have a 2030 panel that's not backward compatible with 2020. But so I'd like to, hope that we are future-proofed a little bit. But no, I think, what I tried to say in my presentation is we are still at the beginning of this journey. We're not anywhere near where we would like to be, or certainly where I would like to be.
Thank you so much to both of you. I'm having a few more comments around the compatibility between different panels. And whilst we're primarily focused on ISAC because that is the panel offerings that have been most utilized in the wider world, I think it is a universal challenge when you have historically been testing using 2006 or a different panel provider such as AKC, how to have some sort of communication or compatibility with 2020, and that different kennel clubs requirements and different breed club requirements are based on different panels. And there is probably not a good by the sounds of it, technology solution to this, other than to perhaps encourage usage of SNP-based panels or the ISAC SNP-based panels moving forward, and to recognize that there is going to be some kind of time and generational time that needs to happen between having dogs that are tested using both STR or other panels and the ISAC 2020 panels, and there may just not be a really good solution around to that. Our other panelists can see the question related to this from Anya, so if you have any comments to make, we recognize that this is a real challenge, and to address that kind of back compatibility, and there may just not be a good solution other than you're going to have to likely retest at least one generation. We've also had a few questions, again, kind of require around the laboratories not requiring certified collection. And I think that I'll let the other panelists weigh in, but from my perspective, perhaps that needs to be something in your consideration about which test provider you recognize and use. I think if I was a breed club or a kennel club, I would have a preference for a laboratory that requires some sort of certified or independent collection, or to have some kind of system in place that helps with that. A lot of breed clubs I'm aware of who are excited about parentage profiling will have volunteers at dog shows or other breed relevant events to have people take independently verified, usually using microchips, collection points. And but again, if there are mistakes or deceptions, the deans don't lie, so they're usually caught at some point. I hope that answers that query. And just a kind of related to that, this is something that I can speak to, but I would love to have someone else talk about perhaps the differences between what are called breed estimation or breed verification tests like Embark or Wisdom versus parentage testing, or perhaps Bill would like to, if I'm not putting him on the spot, breed identification and whether that's kind of recognized by kennel clubs or not. I can speak to that, but maybe someone else would like to.
Well, I'll start off by.
Thank you.
It's a very difficult topic because I think my own view is it causes confusion. You use the words DNA, and it means that there's a lack of understanding amongst breeders and owners about what that actually means. and we do not, where we have disputes about puppies, you know, and someone will contact us and say, I don't believe my puppy is the puppy that I was sold by the breeder, we will only use parentage testing to verify that. We will not recognize breed test results. And one of the reasons why is because most of the panels at the moment, or the big ones, for example, are referencing them against American databases, not UK databases, and there are fundamental differences. We have also had some very dubious results provided to us, and I'm not criticizing the laboratories, but we have had some dubious results. We had a parentage dispute over a Chihuahua puppy, and the result came back from a breed test that said the puppy was 70% Great Dane. Now that, of course, something there wasn't quite right, and of course it led to all sorts of accusations between the breeder and the buyer of the puppy. So we simply do not recognize breed assignment tests at the moment as a proof, if you like, of what a puppy is.
I would like to add something up to that, because and maybe I will just fuel up some discussion, so I'm sorry beforehand. But I think that within the FCI, we have the rule that we accept each other's pedigrees. And we have to obey to that rule, or there must be something completely wrong. And sometimes you don't know where it went wrong, but we just have to accept pedigrees from abroad. So even if there would be some additional breeds added, and I completely agree with Bill that it might be something due to the reference population. But next to that, it is something that we can't control over all the generations. And we can just say something about the parentage verification, and that is very precise and sure, one question and one answer, but you can't say something about the whole background and everything that might have happened somewhere in your own country or somewhere else. So that might fuel up the discussion, but I still want to add that to this point.
Thank you very much, Laura. I appreciate that. We've had a variety of questions about the differences between breed estimation or determination tests, parentage tests, and health risk or disease panel tests. I just wanted to remind participants that we have a summary of the differences between tests and what they can and cannot do, and what information can or cannot come from those different kinds of tests on the dogwellnet.com website to give you a little summary. And I think we can also plan to share that information with the participants after the meeting as well, just so you have a handy little list to remind yourselves of all of these different tools that are out there. I know that they can sometimes be a little bit confusing, particularly when they're combined into one package or one resource. I've saved this last question to the end as we're starting to run out of time, because I think it is a beautiful question to talk about in what might be next steps, and potentially how IPFD or this community can help each other and help support each other. We've already had a few ideas from our panelists, but we've had a question about whether it would be possible to set up a worldwide database with all of the parentage data, or they've just mentioned data that breeders can have access to with regard to their respective breeds. So I wondered if there were any comments from the participants today or from the panelists today about the idea of a worldwide, some sort of worldwide database, and if you see any challenges, or if there might be some enthusiasm for us to explore these possibilities after this meeting, and if there are any volunteers that would like to be involved in that conversation, maybe you could make yourselves known as well. Any thoughts or comments on that from our panelists?
I'm happy to make a comment. I think this is just a general comment, Aimee. I think that the Kennel Club in the UK is very keen to collaborate with other organisations. I think there are challenges to that, but I think that we are. You know, one of the reasons why we're a big supporter of IPFD is we see huge value in working with other kennel clubs. I think we do too many things in isolation. So I think the work that you've done on the genetic testing harmonization project is extremely valuable. And I can see that IPFD should be the go-to place for that. So I think basically, in answer to your question, yes, I think absolutely there is room for collaboration and for working together.
I think it would be lovely from a breeder perspective as well that so many breeders are using international stud dogs in particular, but particularly if you're in a part of Europe where the borders are really nearby, to be any way to make it a little smoother or easier to exchange data when you're breeding across country lines, to me it just seems super helpful for the dogs and for the dog breeders as well. Deviating slightly, there's been a comment from one of our genetic test providers again, who mentioned that most genetic test providers request to have the sampling person or official to be identified on the report. So that's another way of trying to provide some robustness to the initial parentage sample collection. Just a little comment that might be helpful for people to know. Are there any other comments either from the panelists or from the participants today about some sort of international data exchange, or any volunteers who'd like to take that conversation further? I would love to hear from them.
Sometimes I think, would it be as easy to just share the one profile of that animal that is needed for another kennel club? So if the laboratories that are doing the parentage verification, could they just send a document with the information so they don't have to type over the results of that particular animal? And maybe that's too easy, but it would help if we could talk to each other about such a simple in-between solution that will help doing the parentage verification while there is no international platform available yet.
Are there any genetic test providers that could just quickly comment on the practicalities of that, or maybe that's something that with a little bit of community spirit we can find a simple solution? We love simple solutions if we can find them. Leanne or anyone else be able to? Oh, thank you, Leanne.
Yeah, we've discussed this also within ISAC. I'm also a member of the ISAC Applied Genetics of Companion Animals Committee. But within ISAC, it's very difficult to set up such a system because, yeah, we're looking into standardization, but not in building an exchange platform. And that's why in the cattle field, ICAR did it. And yeah, I think the platform GenoX for cattle, that works really well. It's a very professional system. But as I mentioned before, I've been in contact with them and they said we have the focus on farm animals. But I think if the dog community thinks this is the best solution, we really should get in touch with them again and see if they can help us.
Sounds like perhaps the next step after this meeting might be to reach out to someone from ICAR, maybe from IPFD as well, just with our experience with so many kennel clubs, and perhaps Leanne and any other volunteers or any other interested parties maybe could email me and make themselves known either after this meeting or in the comments to see if we can have some communication about this. I think there's quite a lot of support for the concept of data exchange in this way. So if we can facilitate that in any way, that would be a great outcome of this meeting and something to work towards. And I see Peter's just raised his hand as well.
Yeah, maybe just a short comment. this international exchange of data is much more supported in species where we have traditional massive international gene flow. Example is cattle. And in species where this gene flow is not so active and in such a volume, there is probably a little bit less interest for establishing exchange platforms. However, it would be for the breed extremely important and extremely useful to have it, certainly.
Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate that comment. Do we have any other questions from the audience? I do see that there in the Q&A, there's some specific link requests and some specific information requests that I will try to address after this meeting. So we will share some of that information with participants after the meeting, so don't worry. I just had a question from the the audience. If there were to be a data exchange platform, they were asking if it would only be accessible by the laboratories, or they assume that it'll only be accessible by the laboratories. So she proposes that we just go for it, or they propose that we just go for it. And that is an interesting query to bring up, because there is potentially some international challenges when it comes to sharing data and privacy. But again, that's something that I think we can be addressed usually through participants simply confirming that they're happy for this information to be exchanged, or by using anonymity tools as and when they are needed. But a good point to make that kind of raises the data exchange laws that can vary as well. Are there any further questions or comments, or any other last messages that the panelists would like to raise? We've just lost one of our panelists due to some challenges with the London Underground, but we're okay with that. I can probably address anything that Bill could a little bit as well. And then just one last question. If Catherine Mellish happens to be joining us today, there was a question about whether they would be planning to provide the ISAG 2020 profiling in the UK through CAGT. If you're here and can answer that question, that'd be great. Otherwise, I can follow up with you after the meeting. Any final questions? Okay, I would like to then suggest that as perhaps the next steps, it sounds like firstly, it looks like we maybe should be exploring a way to have an international exchange, which IPFD can communicate with Leanne and our panelists and any other interested participants after this meeting on. Please, if you're interested in joining in these conversations or exploring this possibility, make yourselves known to me. You can email me directly or communicate through this platform today. And then secondly, given that there were a lot of questions about just some of the differences between tests that are available and panels, we will work, IPFD will work to provide a summary of the different panels, their advantages and disadvantages, the different technologies, and what the different genetic tests can and cannot do to try to address some of these more broad and general questions. And please do feel encouraged to contact IPFD after this meeting. If we can't answer the questions that you have directly, then we certainly can reach out to panelists or other experts on your behalf to try to address some of your queries. And I just wanted to say a final thank you to all of our speakers and our panelists today. We really, really appreciate you volunteering your time to do this. And I think it's been hugely worthwhile. We had a large number of participants from a large number of countries, new friends and old friends. So we really want to thank you for joining us today. And we hope that we can continue to have these collaborative conversations. And if after this meeting there is still plenty of interest in exploring some of the aspects of parentage profiling that have been raised today, we will certainly be open to having another meeting or having smaller meetings afterwards. And I will hand over for one final goodbye to our CEO, Mark.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. Sorry for the glitch at the early part of the meeting with technology, but that is the world we live in. But it worked out to be phenomenal and an amazing exchange of information and lots of enthusiasm by our panelists as well as our delegates who have been listening to the presentation. Thank you to everyone. And it was really exciting to actually see a lot of people's names who were attendees who are actually contributors to dogwellnet.com, or some of their research or some of their findings have been published on dogwellnet.com. So it's an amazing community. We greatly appreciate your support and commitment to dog health and wellness, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. My hearty thanks to Aimee and David and Anne and Katerina from IPFD. These take a lot of work to put together, and kudos to you for making it happen. We look forward to doing this again. And again, thank you to all of our Kennel Club members and to our contributing partners. You make it possible for us to do this work, and we greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to doing more. Again, to our panelists, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days to join us. And we wish everyone a great week, and thank you very much.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.